wind, amazed by the number of times I had sinned, and the countless enemies that could have been friends. Here he comes again, he's my friend. He keeps sending the angels from up on high. He keeps sending the angels, gonna keep me from crying. He keeps sending the angels, sweet and true. He keeps sending the angels, like you. Good morning, everyone.
Hey, good morning. Good morning.
I'm doing the scripture this morning, but first of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to let me do this.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm not a member of this church. My wife and I, we go to our own church when we're not here. But whenever we want a break, this is where we come. And it's not just the breakfast. But mainly it's the people here. The first day we walk through that door, we enjoy ourselves because people welcome us.
Thank you.
So thank you for this opportunity. Today's scripture is Matthew chapter 25, verses 34 through 40. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to eat? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or something needing clothes and we clothed you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for me, whatever you did for one of my least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." The word of Christ for the people.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, love that opportunity to approach someone in the foyer and invite them to be a part of the service. That there is no special requirement to be up here, for all have fallen short. It's not like a secret club or handshake. All are welcome up here. So thank you for responding. That was a paid endorsement by re-election for J.R. Atkins as pastor campaign. What an interesting scripture for our discussion today. It goes along with our topic, Beyond Our Homes, so well. Jesus is visiting with his disciples, and they're saying, "When did we do all these things?" And Jesus responds, "Whenever you did it for the least of these brothers or sisters, you did it for me." Boy, that just gets me. It makes me think about, who have I passed by? Who have I not even given eye contact to because I was in my own business, maybe my own phone, whatever. So today's sermon is going to consist of a series of questions and dialogue with Reverend Laura Rappold. with the North Georgia Housing and Homeless Council. Our goal is to explore some of the issues that surround homelessness. You know, I invited her because I was praying and seeking someone to come in and visit with us. There was, as I would describe, a groundswell within the Hapeville community from various points and different groups, people that are saying, what can we do? And one of the first things we can do is become better informed and more aware. Otherwise, we kind of do a knee-jerk reaction out of our attempt to love and serve. We may be either duplicating services or providing things that are not necessary. So we're looking for things to do immediately while we seek what is our longer term idea. So I thought Laura would be a great person to come and share that, especially since today we're also taking up a offering to that organization. And when I talked to Laura, I said, well, tell me a little bit about what y'all do. Her first response is, well, we give out grants. Which at that point I said, you gotta come, and I didn't even know anything more about it. So after our time in worship today, we'll take our quick break, 15 minutes. And those that wanna come back in, the goal is for Laura to be here and us to talk about action plans. What can we do to move the ball forward and start implementing some of the ideas? Whether we leave here with a specific plan or not, our goal is to move forward and hopefully get a direction to go. So with that, Laura, why don't you come up and join me? And first of all, I'm sorry I didn't say it, but you are an elder in the Methodist Church.
I'm a deacon.
A deacon?
Yes.
Well, that's a great place to start. Explain to us the difference between a deacon and an elder.
Okay, so good morning, everybody.
Good
Thanks
morning.
for having me, and I agree, this is the most welcoming church, so thank you all so much for your hospitality and your food and your coffee and friendliness, so thank you. In the Methodist Church, we have two orders of ordination, elders and deacons. Elders are generally, their calling is to order the life of the church, so a senior pastor is going to be an elder. Elders also preside over the sacraments and itinerate. You may be familiar with that, where the bishop and the cabinet move elders from church to church. Elders can serve in a variety of capacities of ministry, but more often than not are going to be your senior pastor and associate pastor in your churches. Deacons are called to connect the church and the world. We are also clergy. We do not administer the sacraments, and we are not itinerated. We find our own appointments. But we can do weddings, we can do funerals, we can preach, we can teach, we can do all of the things that you might think about. But our main calling is to connect the church and the world, as I said, and many deacons feel a special call to service, to reaching the lost and the sick and the hungry and the homeless and those who are in whatever way marginalized or sort of outside, and bringing, connecting the church with those folks and those folks with the church and building relationships in that way. So I love being a deacon. Sorry, I talk about it a lot. The Deacon's Orders was really created in 1996. I started seminary in 1999 with no intention of being ordained because I'd never even heard about the deacon. And when I went to Candler and learned about it, I thought, this is what I have wanted. So yeah, I love being a deacon. It's wonderful.
Thank you. So you're with, and I have to read this because it's a long title. Her business cards are 3x5. She's the whole time. She's with the North Georgia Housing and Homeless Council, and that's part of our North Georgia Conference. Are you a separate nonprofit?
We're what we call an administrative agency of the conference. So the conference is really my employer, but my office is at Decatur First United Methodist. I rent a classroom and have a little office there. But we serve the whole conference. Do you want me to start telling you what we do? Are you ready to hear about that? Okay. So our primary purpose, our motto is helping the church serve our neighbors in need. So our primary purpose is to administer grants. We do capital and operational grants, and I can tell you more about that in a little bit. But to help churches and other nonprofits and ministries serve their communities, primarily through housing and hunger issues. So if, say, this church had a food pantry, you could apply for an operational grant from us. We could offer you funds that would support that food pantry. You could buy food for it with those funds, things like that. Our capital grants might include, say, if you were like, well, we serve hot meals 3 days a week, but we don't have an industrial size refrigerator and freezer. We could help you purchase one of those for your room or something like that. There's lots of other examples that we can get into, but that's our main goal, is to support ministries and churches and nonprofits that are doing this important work of trying to address the needs in their communities of poverty and homelessness and hunger.
So when we give money today, we'll pass the plate later, as it says on the handout. Will that money be earmarked specifically for yours? And then do you also get money from the conference?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. So any money that's collected in the homeless offering through all the Methodist churches in our conference, which we do annually, you've probably heard we have a lot of special offerings in the United Methodist Church, Aldersgate, the Children's Home, Wesley Woods, etc., and they're all wonderful. I would never say anything bad about any of the offerings, but I'm going to tell you why the homeless offering is wonderful and awesome. Because 100% of the money that is collected through the homeless offering goes into those grants. None of that goes to pay my salary, none of it goes to print these materials. It's all going back out. So you can know that when you give to the homeless offering today, whether you give $1 or $1 million, it's going to be used in communities across North Georgia to address some of these needs. We're very committed to that. We also do receive a little bit of money from the annual conference that supports our operational costs, like my salary and printing and things like that. And we also have an endowment that was established when this administrative agency was created, so that we're able to draw from that to sustain the operational costs, so that every penny of the homeless offering can go out into the communities.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate the work you do. Can you help us, now that we've kind of talked about you and your call and the agency, let's move into the current state of affairs.
Okay.
So we see what we see in homeless here. People may be aware of places in Atlanta that care. The City of Refuge comes up a lot. Mount Zion is a Methodist church down the road, and they do some feeding.
Mm-hmm.
So we're somewhat aware, but we're also trying to check that.
Yeah.
What are our assumptions? So can you kind of give us a little bit about currently how things are being handled or what's going on?
Sure. Homelessness is not a new problem, and it's not going away. People are working really hard to address needs, all across our state, but it's just such a huge problem because it's systemic. There are, I was talking out here with some of you about some ministries and things that are like a quick fix, like, okay, you need a bottle of juice. Sure, I'll get you a bottle of juice, no problem. And I think that's great. Sometimes we see a need in front of us and we meet it. But we've also got to have the folks who are willing to say, all right, I'll get you a bottle of juice, but let's talk about why you can't buy a bottle of juice. Let's figure out what the other issues are. And one thing I have learned in my work, I've been working in homeless services since 2009, is that it's never just one thing. It's never just, oh, if only you had a job, everything would be fine. Many of the folks that I've worked with over my time have been employed. They've just been underemployed, or they're making, a non-livable wage. There's a statistic that just blows me away every time I hear it, which is that if you make minimum wage in this country, you work 40 hours a week, a full-time job at minimum wage, you cannot afford what we call fair market rent for any apartment in the United States. So there's a real disparity in housing costs and wages, and that's something that needs to be addressed, on a high level. So that makes it difficult. And then we were also speaking out here about safety nets. A lot of folks don't have a safety net of family or friends, that can sort of help them if they fall in hard times. I've been very fortunate in my life that should I have lost a job or something like that, there are people who would not have let me have to be homeless, but not everyone has that. Bad decisions. I've made a few bad decisions in my life, many. But I've, again, had that safety net and support, and I had some resources that I didn't do anything to earn. It had to do with where I was born or what, my family situation. Things that we can't control do contribute to our situation in life. Your zip code that you're born in makes a difference in how your life will play out. So another thing that's difficult is if you are, say, with children, sometimes it's harder to find shelter for folks especially if it's, say, a man with younger children. It's harder to be placed in a shelter because they're more often for women and children, or just women, or if you're like an 18-year-old young man, but you're still living with your parent. You know, there are all of these different regulations that places have that make it more difficult to find housing or temporary housing. I've worked with people who, you know, have, I worked at Action Ministries in what we call transitional housing at the time. Transitional housing has kind of faded out now, and now we do something called rapid rehousing. But in transitional housing, we helped folks, we placed them in homes that we owned, and they could stay there for up to 2 years, and we would work on a lot of life skills and budgeting and employment and things like that, and getting some things straightened out so that people could move on to self-sufficiency. And it was a great program. But you would see these situations where, like, okay, we've got you set up with your job, and we've got this child care assistance program, and we've worked so hard to get you there, and we're gonna take the kids there Monday morning, and you get to the place and they said, well, there's a typo in this young man's name, so he can't stay here today. So mom can't go to work. So mom loses her job, and the cycle starts again. That's a true example. It broke everyone's heart, you know, so they had to get back at the back of the line because there was an O instead of an A in the child's name, and we were just devastated, you know, and so it's always so much more complicated than just, oh, you need a job, or you're lazy, or, you know, you've struggled with addiction, or whatever it is. There's always so many other factors that we're dealing with, and so if we can find ways to help sort of untangle that knot, I think that's when we'll make real progress.
Can you explain, so you said what transitional
Mhm.
2-year,
Yes.
what's this
The rapid rehousing. In transitional housing, so Action Ministries, we were the leaseholder or the owner of the homes. And so we would move a family in, they could stay for up to 24 months, and then we would move them out and help them find an apartment or a house where they would then become the leaseholder and stay there forever. In rapid rehousing, the clients are the leaseholders from the very beginning. So the folks working at an Action Ministries or whatever might say, okay, I found this apartment complex that will rent to you. We will help you pay your rent for this many months while you are getting employment and learning to save and doing these things. And then we'll transition out of paying your rent and you will get to stay there. So you don't have to move again. And that's just what our government prefers funding now, and they think it works better.
So you kind of touched on this, but some of the example programs
Oh, yeah.
that the North Georgia Housing and Homeless Council supports
Yeah.
through grants.
I'd love to talk about that. So, there's a shelter in Covington, Georgia that services 3 counties. It's the only homeless shelter in, I believe it's Clayton, Rockdale, and it's either Newton or Henry, my geography is off for them, but it's the 3 counties in that area. It's the only homeless shelter in the whole area. So they are always full, as you can imagine. And we have worked with them for years. They had wooden beds and wooden lockers in the rooms and things like that. We've replaced all of those with metal because they last longer and they're not as susceptible to things like bed bugs and things like that. We've done all kinds of renovations there for them. I love them because they're working so hard to meet a need in such an area that has a great need but just doesn't have a lot of services. And there's also churches in that area that we started working with that are providing hot meals. They'll go over and get the folks from there and bring them there and feed them. One of my other favorites is up in, it's almost in Tennessee. It's in Elizabeth Lee UMC. It's it's Chickamauga. They have a group of women in their church who were retired educators, and their church is situated directly across the street from the elementary school. And they said, there's kids leaving that elementary school every day that don't have anywhere to go. What are we going to do about that? They're just leaving and they're wandering around and they're too young and they don't have anywhere to go. So they opened up their church for an after school program where they do homework, they do crafts, they do a healthy snack. They have a food pantry there where folks can take food home anytime they need it. They've got, a coat closet for when it's cold and people need a warm coat. And they just do it. Their church, gives the money and we support them with a grant, but it's, they just do it. They see a need and they start to meet it, and it's made a huge difference for these children. And then when these children, we've learned that once they get into middle and high school, they come back because they want to be counselors and sort of help run the program, but because it meant so much to them and it was such a safe and happy place for them to be after school. So they've sort of built relationships with those families Had another church that was working with a school up, I want to say it was in Lyerly, and they realized how much food was being thrown away at lunch, and like unopened, not just, I ate half my macaroni and cheese and threw away the other half, unopened food that people were not eating. So they developed a program where they took any of the food that was not eaten at each meal, fruit that wasn't touched, boxes and bags and crackers and packages and milk that wasn't opened, and they've set up a whole feeding program for their community just through that food that wasn't being used anyway, and now people are having more to eat. So what I love is, what inspires me so much about this job is that I get to visit all these places and see how folks are looking around their community and saying, well, we have a coat closet and we have a food pantry, but what we don't have is a place for people to spend the night when it's really cold. How can we do that? And they just get it started. And we can help with funding, and the church usually will support it, and more often than not it takes volunteers and the money will come. So I think looking and seeing what your need is the best way to get started.
Excellent. So I have a specific question. So last night, many of us were gathered across the park at Christ Church and had a film night. And there was someone who needed some care. And so she called a friend. And I walked her to the car and made sure she was safe. Do you know this guy? Whatever. Mm-hmm. And then shortly that she came back. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where she went afterwards, but I did not know what to do.
Okay. Well, it's really hard to know what to do. You're right. This is a good question. You didn't tell me you were going to ask me this.
I didn't know what. It's the Holy Spirit.
Okay. So, when I'm in these situations, one thing I try always to do, I don't always succeed, I try to treat everyone with dignity, which it sounds like you did. That these are people. We have more in common than we have, that separates us. So, to sort of realize and remember, take a moment like, this is a person. I'm not sure I know how to help, but the literal least I can do is treat this person with dignity and respect. Which sounds like that happened. I also, in situations where someone asks me for money, I don't always give it. I sort of just try to trust my gut of whether I should. But if I do, once I give the money, it doesn't matter to me what it's used for. It's a gift, and it's theirs now, and they can do with it what they want. So I wouldn't put conditions on my helping someone. If I chose to give, I would say,
So you don't
do this.
like pulled out a 20 and say, if you'll accept Jesus now?
No, I would never
Just
do that.
checking.
No.
I didn't think so.
No. If they said I'm hungry, I might say, well, can I go in here and buy you some food, something like that. But if I just said, well, we're not around a grocery store, but here's $20 and you can go buy some food. If they said, great, I've now got a bottle of vodka, well, that's your choice. I gave you the money, it's yours to do what you want with. I hope you'll use it for what you need it for. I get a lot of phone calls of people needing assistance and of varying kinds of, whether they need housing or they need rental assistance, because when you look things up on the internet, I do come up. And unfortunately, my organization does not provide direct services, so I have to always say, I'm so sorry, but we are a grant-making organization, and I'm not allowed to provide direct services. I don't have that, but I always try to at least have some ideas of where I could send people to call that I think might answer the phone. And so, if you're able to kind of develop a list of resources that are in the area, it might be helpful to at least say, all right, we don't have a place where you can sleep tonight, but let's call a few of these numbers and see if there's a place. And hopefully, that's probably what I would have done. I don't that you should have been like, okay, well, move in with me. I think that there are ways to be helpful and ways that you can also maintain some boundaries.
So that's pretty much what I did.
Okay.
So when the gentleman came to pick her up, we talked about the City of Refuge, because it was one place that I'd heard of and what have you. And then the second step is I'm planning on making a trip there. So if anyone wants to go and visit the City of Refuge and see what they offer and what have you, it might be a good learning opportunity for us to bring some of that institutional knowledge back to Hapeville. And it also brings up a point, sometimes we'll say, well, they have a homeless shelter, let's build one too. When the answer might be, let's provide the transportation, or let's provide some money to that shelter to offset some people or other, so we're looking for some of those. How about watchwords? What should we be careful of as we kind of walk through these next steps?
I think what I'd like to caution people about is be sure you're listening and paying attention and researching what is already happening in your community. And I know you've got your mayor right in your congregation, so that's a great
He knows
resource.
everything.
I could tell, yeah. Well, it's a great resource to have someone. I would speak with social workers at schools who can say, you know, we have this many kids who don't have a permanent home, or, you know, that need food on the weekends or things like that. What I caution people about is sort of letting your own, you know, your own idea or your own desires get in the way of what's actually needed in the community. So if you're like, it is truly on my heart that we must have a coat closet, that's all I've ever wanted to do is make sure people have enough coats in the winter, without noticing that, say, the Baptist church, like a block away, has a coat closet that's functioning and is serving folks. And the Baptist church is like, yeah, everyone who comes and gets a coat is like, I would love a hygiene kit. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have 2 coat closets, if we had a hygiene, you know, a place for things like that? So just sort of learning what's already there and not duplicating, you know, making sure that needs are met and trying to sort of coordinate with folks, you know, if there's just that, like the Hapeville community says, these are the needs we see, how can we meet them? And it should be something that you're excited about and invested in, of course, as a congregation, because that's the way it will succeed, but at the same time, not letting your own ego of like, oh, well, this is obviously how we should solve it, without actually finding out would be my best advice.
I think that's good words. It's challenging for us because it is easier to see what someone else is doing and copying and duplicating. And sometimes what we need to see is their method of delivery, how they discern that that was what they were doing, how it's working, and then tweak it for whatever our needs are. So this is the last question. It's for 500 points and a chance to go to the bonus round. And it's just any final thoughts to us. I mean, we're listening. You've got our attention. What should we be praying for?
Okay. Thank you. So one other thing I thought of is don't be afraid to fail. If you try something and it doesn't quite work, or it seems like, okay, this doesn't seem to be meeting the need that we thought it would, how can we rethink it? You know, don't be afraid to have something not go great right from the start. You know, it's easy when we like plan and pray about something and we're like, this is, I'll give you an example. My church, and I was involved in this, we have these showers in our gym that aren't used, and I was like, okay, I think we need a shower ministry. I went to like a Decatur community meeting, and I said, I think we would like to open our church up on Saturdays for folks who could use a shower. We'll give them fresh socks and underwear. We'll have some breakfast out, things like that. Everyone was like, great idea. We know folks who need that, and here's a way you can publicize it and all this. And so we did everything right, okay? And we did it for several months, and we had one person come. And it was hard because we thought we had really done all of my great advice, you know. We thought, you know, we think there's a need for this, we need this, and we had reasons that only 1 or 2 people came the whole time. But we weren't afraid to say, this is not working. What is going to work here? And what has grown out of that is that we've partnered with an organization called A Place for Everyone in DeKalb, and we now serve as a warming shelter. So that same gym area in our church that we were using for the shower ministry is now a warming shelter on nights when it gets below 35 degrees. Folks can come, have dinner, sleep in the gym classrooms. They can use our showers if they want to, and then they have breakfast. And it's all volunteer run through our county and through our church and things like that. So that failure allowed us to make room for something that is really working and meeting a current need in our community. So just sort of being open to the fact that even with the best of intentions and all of the right preparation, it might not look exactly like you thought it was going to, but at the same time, God is probably preparing the way for something new to be born out of that.
Amen. Thank you for being with us
so
today.
much. Thank
you
you.
for sticking around with us. You know, as we wrap up our discussion, I was thinking of a verse that might be appropriate. And I went to Romans 8:28, and this relates to what you just said. it says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." We have intent, we take action, but the results are open. And I know I've gotten hung up a lot in life when the results were not what I expected. I jokingly say, I know I passed the cure of cancer several times because it didn't look like what I thought it should look like. So thank you for being with us and reminding us of that. And we look forward to those that can stick around after service today and have that action discussion. As we sing our closing hymn, we have a separate offering plate that Alan will pass around if you'd like to give to the North Georgia Housing and Homeless Council. Please contribute to that as we sing our last song, Shine, Jesus, Shine.
Please rise, y'all.
Oh, yeah.